Ambassador Lysara stood before the great crystal window of the High Council chamber, watching her world die. Far below, the cities of Harmonia 7 glowed with their usual soft light, but she could see the darkness spreading at the edges. The consuming swarm had reached the outer settlements 3 cycles ago, and nothing could stop it. Her crystalline body hummed with anxiety, the sound creating small ripples in the air around her. Behind her, the council members whispered among themselves, their voices like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. They were afraid. They had every right to be. The swarm was unlike anything the Galactic Concordance had ever faced. It consumed everything organic, learned from every defense, and adapted to every strategy. The Velans had tried energy barriers. The swarm evolved to absorb them. They had tried sonic disruption. The swarm grew resistant. They had even attempted communication, hoping to find common ground with the intelligence that drove the creature. The swarm had responded by consuming the entire diplomatic vessel. 17 colonies were gone now. Billions of Velans had vanished into the biomass of the swarm. The creature was heading toward the homeworld, and every projection showed the same result: total extinction within 20 cycles. "We must send another request to the Concordance fleet," one council member said, his harmonic voice trembling. "Surely the Orinthians will respond. They have the finest tactical minds in the galaxy." "The Orinthians are protecting their own borders," Lysara replied quietly. "The swarm has spread to 14 systems now. Every species with military capability is fighting for their own survival." "What about the Gorfins? Their shield technology is being overwhelmed as we speak," Lysara interrupted. "I received word this morning. The Gorfin homeworld has fallen silent." The council chamber filled with discordant notes of fear. Lysara understood their panic. The Velans were a peaceful species, as were most members of the Concordance. They had evolved on worlds where cooperation meant survival, where violence was unnecessary and unthinkable. Their technology was advanced, their culture rich, but they had no framework for the systematic destruction that war required. "Then we are lost," another council member whispered. Lysara closed her optical sensors, feeling the weight of despair settle over her consciousness. But then she remembered something, a file she had seen months ago, marked with warning symbols, information about a quarantine system on the edge of Concordance space. "There is one option we have not tried," she said slowly. "What option?" "We have exhausted every resource." "Not every resource," Lysara said. "There is a species in quarantine. The Concordance voted to isolate them 60 cycles ago. They come from a world called Earth." The council chamber went silent. Then came a wave of shocked harmonics. "The Deathworlders?" one member said, his voice sharp with alarm. "You cannot be serious. They are dangerous, unstable." "They are survivors," Lysara said firmly. "I have read the reports. Earth has a gravity 2.3 times that of our world. Their atmosphere is corrosive to most species. Their weather patterns include cyclonic storms that would shred our finest vessels, and yet they thrive there. They call it home." "They are also violent," another council member argued. "The reports speak of constant warfare among their own kind. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They have concepts like murder and genocide that most concordant species cannot even comprehend." "Yes," Lysara said, "and perhaps that is exactly what we need." The debate lasted for hours, but in the end, desperation won. The council authorized Lysara to send a distress signal to the Sol system, to the beings who called themselves humans. She crafted the message carefully, explaining the situation, the swarm, the extinction event facing her people. Then she waited. 1 cycle passed, then 2, then 3. Lysara began to lose hope. Perhaps the humans had not received the message. Perhaps they chose not to respond. Perhaps they were as afraid of the swarm as everyone else. On the fourth cycle, a response arrived. The message was brief and direct, translated into Concordance Standard, but retaining a bluntness that shocked Lysara. It read, UECV Indomitable responding to distress call. Captain Dae-hyun commanding. We are en route. Estimated arrival, 6 cycles. Prepared docking coordinates and tactical briefing. Humanity answers. 6 cycles. The fastest Concordance vessels needed 15 cycles to cross that distance. Lysara checked the message 3 times to ensure she had not misread it. The council convened again, and Lysara shared the response. The reactions ranged from relief to terror. What have we invited to our world? One member asked. Salvation, Lysara said. Or so we hope. As the cycles passed, Lysara prepared for the humans' arrival. She studied every file available on Earth and its people. What she learned both fascinated and horrified her. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world where almost everything could kill them. They survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and their own self-destructive tendencies. They had split the atom, walked on their moon, and built machines that could think. They also had a disturbing relationship with violence. Their history was filled with wars, conflicts that killed millions of their own kind. They had words for things that Velans could not imagine: ambush, massacre, genocide, torture. Yet they also had words like compassion, sacrifice, heroism, and love. Lysara did not understand humans. She was not sure anyone in the Concordance did. But as she watched the swarm consume another settlement, she knew understanding was less important than survival. On the 6th cycle, her sensors detected the arrival. 5 human vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They were massive, angular things that looked more like weapons than ships. Their hulls were thick armor instead of the elegant curves of Concordance design. They radiated heat signatures that would cook most species alive. Leading them was the UECV Indomitable. Lysara transmitted the docking coordinates with trembling harmonics. Within hours, the human vessels were in orbit around Harmonia 7. A shuttle launched from the Indomitable, heading for the council chambers. Lysara went to meet them, her crystalline body humming with anxiety and hope. Behind her, the council members gathered, their harmonics creating a symphony of fear and curiosity. The airlock opened. 5 humans stepped through, and Lysara experienced true shock for the first time in her long life. They were tall, made of flesh and bone, covered in strange fabrics. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning everything with a predatory awareness that made Lysara's instincts scream danger. They carried devices on their hips, weapons, she realized with horror. They brought weapons to a diplomatic meeting. The one in front stepped forward. He was broad-shouldered and moved with controlled purpose. When he spoke, his voice was deep and solid, lacking the musical quality of Velan speech. Ambassador Lysara, he said, I am Captain Dae-hyun of the United Earth Confederation. We received your distress call. Show us this threat, and we will deal with it. Lysara looked at him, at these strange beings from a world of death, and felt something she had not felt in cycles. She felt hope. The meeting room had been prepared carefully. The Velans had adjusted the temperature to match human preferences, though it felt uncomfortably warm to Lysara. They had installed chairs, studying human anatomy files to get the proportions correct. They had even prepared a meal, though the idea of humans consuming dead organic matter still disturbed her. Captain Dae-hyun sat across from Lysara, his team arranged around him. Lieutenant Hana, a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to catch every detail. Wu, the engineer, whose hands were scarred in ways that suggested a lifetime of working with dangerous machinery. Major Tae, the combat specialist, whose very presence radiated controlled violence, and Dr. Nari, who studied Lysara with professional curiosity. Tell us about the swarm, Dae-hyun said, his voice calm and direct. Lysara activated the holographic display. Images of the swarm filled the air, a writhing mass of biological matter, constantly shifting and adapting. The humans leaned forward, studying it with intense focus. "It appeared 6 months ago in the outer colonies," Lysara explained. "At first we thought it was a natural organism, perhaps a space-borne life form. But it demonstrated intelligence. It learns from every encounter. When we used energy weapons, it developed energy-absorbing tissues. When we tried sonic disruption, it grew death clusters. It consumes all biological matter and converts it into more of itself." "Biological adaptation," Nari said, making notes on a device. "How fast does it adapt?" "Within hours of exposure to a new threat." The humans exchanged glances. Lysara could not read their expressions, but she sensed something in their body language. Not fear, exactly. Something more like recognition. "Have you tried killing it?" Tay asked. The question struck Lysara like a physical blow. The council members in attendance made sounds of distress. "Killing?" one council member said. "We do not understand. We have tried to stop it, to defend against it." "No," Tay said. "I mean systematic extermination, total war, complete destruction of every cluster, every cell, every trace of it." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Lysara spoke. "We are not warriors," she said quietly. "The concept of deliberate killing, of seeking out life to destroy it, it is not in our nature. We have tried to survive, to escape, to endure, but to hunt something down and kill it methodically?" She paused. "We do not have the cultural framework for such actions." Dae-hyun nodded slowly, understanding crossing his face. "You are a peaceful species. All of you in the Concordance are." "Yes," Lysara said. "Our worlds were gentle. We evolved through cooperation, not conflict. Violence is alien to us." "But not to us," Hana said softly. "No," Dae-hyun agreed. "Earth was not gentle. We climbed to the top of the food chain by being better predators than everything that hunted us. We learned to kill, or we died. It is part of who we are." He looked at Lysara directly. "We can teach you to fight, but first, we need to show you how it is done." Over the next 2 cycles, Lysara watched the humans prepare. What she saw challenged everything she understood about sentient behavior. The humans trained constantly. She observed Tay leading his combat teams through exercises that would kill a Velen instantly. They wore armor that weighed more than an entire Velen body, and they moved in it as if it were a second skin. They lifted weights, ran distances, and practiced fighting with a dedication that bordered on obsession. Hana studied the swarm data for hours without rest, her eyes never leaving the tactical displays. She created simulation after simulation, running scenarios that involved acceptable casualty rates and strategic sacrifices, concepts that made Lysara feel sick. Wu took the human mining equipment and began modifying it into weapons. Thermal lances designed to cut through asteroids became anti-swarm flame units. Kinetic impactors meant for breaking rocks became cluster bombs. He worked with a cheerful efficiency that terrified Lysara. When she asked him how he could create such destructive devices so easily, he had smiled. "On Earth, we have a saying," he told her. "Necessity is the mother of invention. You need the swarm dead. I am inventing ways to make that happen." Nari set up a medical facility that could handle both human and Velen injuries. She studied Velen biology with the same intensity she applied to combat medicine. When a worker accidentally cut himself on human equipment, Nari treated him with gentle expertise, her hands steady and sure. "You are a doctor," Lysara said, watching her work. "A healer, yet you came here to help us fight." "Healing and fighting are not opposites," Nari replied. "I heal so that my people can keep fighting. I fight so that there are people left to heal. On Earth, we learned that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is destroy what threatens the innocent." The concept made Lysara's mind ache, but she was beginning to understand. On the third cycle, the swarm attacked a settlement on Harmonia 7's largest moon. The council immediately ordered evacuation protocols. The humans had a different response. "We are going in," Dae-hyun announced. "But the settlement is already lost," Lysara protested. "The swarm has consumed half the population. We must save who we can." "We will save them by killing the swarm," Tae said, checking his weapon. "Every cluster we destroy now is one less threat later." Lysara watched from orbit as the human dropships descended into hell. The settlement was crawling with swarm biomass, the air thick with spores and acidic mist. The environmental conditions would kill a Velen in seconds. The humans walked right into it. Their armor sealed them against the toxic environment. When acid hit Tae's suit, eating through the outer layer, he simply switched to a backup seal and kept moving. When swarm tendrils tried to grab Hana, she cut them apart with a plasma blade, her movements precise and deadly. Wu deployed his thermal lance, a weapon that burned at temperatures that would vaporize most materials. The swarm tried to adapt, growing heat-resistant tissues, but Wu simply increased the temperature. When that stopped working, he switched to kinetic impactors, smashing the swarm clusters into paste. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the swarm cluster was completely destroyed. The humans had saved 3,000 Velens who were trapped in reinforced shelters. They also lost 2 soldiers. Lysara attended the memorial service. She watched as Nari spoke about the fallen, as Dae-hyun presented their belongings to be sent home, as the entire human force stood in silence. They mourned their dead with the same intensity they applied to killing their enemies. "You cry," Lysara said to Nari afterward. "You feel grief." "Of course," Nari said, wiping her eyes. "We are not machines. Every death hurts. Every loss matters. Then why fight? Why risk yourselves?" Nari looked at her with eyes that held both sadness and strength. "Because if we do not fight, more people die. Because someone has to stand between the innocent and the darkness. Because that is what it means to be human." Lysara returned to the council and delivered her report. The humans had succeeded where every concordance force had failed, but the cost troubled her. "They are violent," one council member said. "They accept death so easily." "No," Lysara corrected. "They accept death reluctantly, but they accept it nonetheless, because the alternative is extinction." She looked at the data streaming in from the moon settlement. The swarm was regenerating, but slower now. The humans had heard it. For the first time, Lysara believed they might actually survive this. The swarm attacked in force 3 cycles later. It had learned from the moon battle and adapted its strategy. Instead of slow consumption, it launched a coordinated assault on 5 settlements simultaneously, spreading the defenders thin. The Velen defense forces scrambled to respond, but Lysara could see the panic in their movements. They were evacuating, retreating, trying to save who they could. It was all they knew how to do. The humans did something different. They attacked. Dae-hyun split his forces into 5 strike teams, each led by one of his officers. Lysara watched from the command center, monitoring 5 simultaneous battles across the planet. What she witnessed would haunt her for the rest of her life, but not in the way she expected. At Settlement 1, Tae led his team into a swarm cluster that had consumed an entire residential district. The biomass was 3 stories deep, pulsing with hostile intelligence. The swarm had prepared for humans this time. It released spores designed to induce paralytic fear, a psychological weapon that had broken every species it encountered. Lysara saw Tae's biometric readings spike. The fear response was working. His heart rate increased, stress hormones flooded his system, his breathing became rapid. The swarm pressed its advantage, surrounding his team with writhing tentacles and acid spray. Then Tai started laughing. "Is that all you got?" His voice crackled over the comm system. "My drill sergeant was scarier than you?" He charged forward, his armor's servos whining with effort as he tore through swarm biomass with his bare hands. His team followed, shouting battle cries that made no logical sense but seemed to fuel their aggression. They were afraid, the biometrics proved it, but they fought anyway. "Fear does not stop them," Lysara said, amazed. "No," Dae-hyun replied from beside her. "Fear tells humans to pay attention. It makes us sharper, faster. We evolved to feel fear and act despite it. That is the gift Earth gave us." At Settlement 2, Hana led a reconnaissance team through swarm territory. The creature had learned to create maze-like structures, trapping and disorienting its prey. Hana's team lost contact with the main force, surrounded by hostile biomass in complete darkness. The swarm cut their communications, destroyed their navigation systems, and released psychic frequencies designed to create confusion and despair. Lysara watched Hana's video feed as the young woman assessed the situation. "Right," Hana said calmly. "No comms, no nav, no support. Standard Tuesday." She pulled out a knife and started marking their path on the swarm's walls, creating a trail. When the biomass tried to heal over her marks, she switched to a chemical marker that the swarm could not absorb. She led her team through the maze using basic navigation techniques, moving toward the sounds of battle with absolute confidence. "She is lost in enemy territory," a council member said. "How can she be so calm?" "She is not lost," Dae-hyun said. "She knows exactly where she is, in a fight. That is enough." At Settlement 3, Wu faced a different challenge. The swarm had adapted to his thermal weapons, growing heat-resistant biomass that could withstand temperatures that would melt steel. His team was pinned down, running low on ammunition. Lysara expected retreat. Instead, Wu started laughing and talking to himself. "Heat does not work? Fine. Let us try cold." He jury-rigged his cooling systems into a weapon, creating a device that flash-froze everything it touched. The swarm's heat-resistant biomass shattered like glass under the sudden temperature change. When that adaptation emerged, Wu switched back to heat, then cold again, then a combination of both. "He is making up new strategies during combat?" Lysara asked, incredulous. "Human brains evolve to solve problems under pressure," Dae-hyun explained. "The more stress we face, the more creative we become. It is why we are dangerous." At Settlement 4, a disaster occurred. A swarm cluster released a toxic compound that ate through human armor. 3 soldiers fell, their suits compromised, their bodies exposed to the lethal environment. Nari rushed forward without hesitation, dragging them to safety while enemy fire rained around her. Lysara watched the doctor work in the middle of a battlefield. Nari sealed the armor breaches with emergency foam, injected antitoxins, and kept her patients alive through sheer determination. When a swarm tendril reached for her, she drew a sidearm and shot it without looking up from her patient. "I am trying to work here," Nari shouted at the swarm. One of the injured soldiers was Tai's younger brother, a private named Kang. Lysara heard Tai's voice over the comm, tight with emotion. "Nari, how is he?" "Alive," Nari replied. "He will stay that way if people stop bothering me." "Understood," Tai said. Then, to his team, "You heard the doctor? Let us give her some peace and quiet. Kill everything." The ferocity of the assault that followed shocked Lysara. The humans fought with renewed intensity, driven by emotion rather than logic. They should have been compromised by their feelings, but instead they channeled them into devastating effectiveness. At Settlement 5, Dae-hyun personally led the defense. The swarm had learned enough about humans to deploy its ultimate weapon, a psychic attack designed to induce complete despair. It broadcast frequencies that triggered every negative emotion, every doubt, every fear. The attack hit the human forces like a physical wave. Lysara saw their biometrics crash. Heart rates dropped, stress hormones spiked, neurological activity showed patterns consistent with severe depression. Soldiers stopped mid-battle, weapons lowering. The swarm pressed forward, sensing victory. Then Dae-hyun started speaking. "I know you feel it," he said over the comm, his voice steady despite the psychic assault. "The hopelessness, the certainty that we will fail, the weight of despair." Lysara expected him to deny it, to claim strength. Instead, he did something that made no tactical sense. He acknowledged it. "We are feeling it because it is real," Dae-hyun continued. "Despair is real. Fear is real. Pain is real. But you know what else is real? Us. We are still here, still breathing, still fighting. The swarm wants us to give up. It wants us to believe we are beaten." His voice grew harder, edged with steel. "But we are humans. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages and plagues and predators and our own stupidity. We looked at a world of death and said, 'This is fine. We will make it work.' We turned every disaster into a story and every story into a reason to keep going." Soldiers began to straighten up, weapons rising. "This thing wants us to feel hopeless," Dae-hyun said. "Let it try. We have felt hopeless before. We felt it in the trenches, in the plagues, in the darkest moments of our history. And you know what we did? We kept going. We always keep going." The humans charged forward with a roar that made the ground shake. The swarm's psychic attack continued, but the humans fought through it, their determination stronger than the induced despair. Lysara watched in amazement as the human forces pushed back the swarm at all 5 settlements. They took casualties, too many casualties. But they did not break. They could not be broken. By the end of the cycle, all 5 settlements were secure. The swarm had been driven back, its clusters destroyed, its biomass scattered and burning. The human forces gathered in the main base, exhausted and wounded. Lysara came down to meet them, needing to understand what she had witnessed. She found Dae-hyun in the medical bay, sitting beside a bed where Kang was recovering. The young soldier was unconscious but stable. "You felt the despair," Lysara said. "I saw your biometric readings. You felt it completely." "Yes," Dae-hyun said, "but you did not let it stop you." "How?" Dae-hyun looked at her with tired eyes. "Because feeling something and letting it control you are different things. We felt the despair. We acknowledged it. And then we chose to fight anyway." "That makes no sense," Lysara said. "If you feel hopeless, how can you choose hope?" "Because hope is not a feeling," Dae-hyun said. "It is a decision. Earth taught us that. When everything is terrible, when all the data says you should give up, you can still choose to try. That choice, that defiance of logic and emotion and circumstance, that is what makes us human." Lysara looked around at the wounded soldiers, at the exhausted faces, at the quiet determination in their eyes. She was beginning to understand why the Concordance had feared these beings, and why her people desperately needed them. The war reached its turning point when Hana discovered the source. Deep scans of the system revealed a massive swarm presence in the crushing depths of a nearby gas giant's atmosphere. The central hive, the intelligence coordinating all swarm activity across 14 star systems, was hiding where no Concordance ship could survive. "The pressure at that depth would collapse our strongest vessels," Lysara said, studying the scans. "The temperature exceeds 500 degrees. The atmospheric composition is toxic to every known form of life." "Not to the swarm," Hana said grimly. "And if we destroy the hive, the remaining clusters lose coordination. They become manageable." "But you cannot reach it," a council member protested. "No ship can survive those conditions." Dae-hyun looked at his team. "We can. Over the next 2 cycles, Wu and his engineering team modified a human deep-sea submersible for atmospheric descent. Lasara watched them work, marveling at their confidence. They were preparing to dive into an environment that made the surface of a star look comfortable. On Earth, we have oceans, Wu explained as he welded reinforcement plates. Deep oceans with crushing pressure and total darkness. We built machines to explore them because we were curious what was down there. This is just another deep dive. But the pressure will be handled by the hull integrity. We designed this for the Mariana Trench. With modifications, it can handle a gas giant's atmosphere. The heat shielding rated for atmospheric re-entry. We have been diving into fire since we invented spacecraft. The toxic atmosphere. Sealed environment with independent life support. We have been breathing our own air in hostile environments for centuries. Lasara realized something profound. Every challenge the gas giant presented was something humans had already encountered on their own world. Earth had prepared them for this. The assault team would be small. Dae-hyun, Tai, Hana, Wu, and 6 other soldiers. The submersible could not hold more. Nari protested being left behind, but Dae-hyun was firm. "We need you here," he said. "When we come back wounded, someone has to put us back together." "When, not if?" Nari asked. "I am an optimist," Dae-hyun replied with a grim smile. The descent began at dawn. Lasara monitored from orbit, watching the submersible drop into the gas giant's atmosphere. The humans maintained comm contact, describing what they saw. "Entering upper atmosphere," Hana reported. "Turbulence is significant." Significant was an understatement. Lasara watched the telemetry as the vessel was thrown about by winds that exceeded any storm in recorded concordance history. The humans rode it out with practiced calm. "Remind me to thank the test pilots who survived Venus probes," Wu said as something exploded against the hull. "Their data is proving very useful." Deeper they went, into layers of atmosphere so dense it became liquid, then something beyond liquid. The pressure mounted steadily. Lasara watched the hull integrity readings drop from 100% to 90, then 80. "Hull stress within acceptable parameters," Wu reported. "The screaming noise is normal." "Probably." "Probably?" Tae asked. "Definitely normal." At 70% hull integrity, they reached the hive. It was massive, a biological structure the size of a city, pulsing with malevolent intelligence. Tendrils of swarm biomass extended in all directions, some reaching up through the atmosphere, others boring deeper into the planet. "Visual contact," Hana said. "It is beautiful in a horrifying way." "Let us make it less beautiful," Dae-hyun said. "Wu, can we deploy the charges?" "Deploying now, but we have a problem. The swarm knows we are here." The hive reacted, sending tendrils to envelope the submersible. The humans fought back with everything they had. Thermal lances cut through biomass. Kinetic impactors smashed clusters. Chemical weapons dissolved tissue. The swarm adapted. For every weapon the humans deployed, the swarm evolved a counter. Heat resistance, kinetic absorption, chemical immunity. It learned faster here in its central hive than it ever had in space. "We are running out of options," Tae said, firing his weapon continuously. "It is adapting to everything." "Then we adapt faster," Dae-hyun said. "Wu, how long until the fusion charges are armed?" 2 minutes, but we have another problem. The charges need to be placed at specific points in the hive structure. Someone has to go outside. Silence filled the comm channel. Outside meant exposure to crushing pressure, toxic atmosphere, and hostile biomass. A death sentence for any unprotected human. "I will go," Tae said. "No," Dae-hyun said. "I will—" "With respect, Captain, you are the only one who can pilot us out of here. I am the combat specialist. This is my job." Before anyone could argue further, Tae was moving. He sealed his armor completely, a process that would give him perhaps 10 minutes in the hostile environment. Then he stepped into the airlock. Lysara watched through the external cameras as Tay emerged into hell. The pressure tried to crush him immediately. His armor groaned and buckled, but held, barely. He moved along the submersible's hull, carrying the fusion charges, making his way toward the hive structure. Swarm biomass attacked him immediately. Tendrils wrapped around his legs, trying to pull him away. Acid sprayed across his visor, eating through the protective coating. Tay kept moving. "First charge placed," he grunted, his voice strained with effort. "Moving to position 2. Tay, your armor integrity is failing." Nari's voice came from orbit. "Get back inside." "After I place the charges." The second charge took longer. The swarm realized what he was doing and focused its full attention on stopping him. Biomass swarmed over him, acid ate through his armor's outer layers, and the pressure began to buckle the internal structure. Lysara heard his breathing become labored. Saw his biometric readings enter dangerous territory. "Second charge placed," Tay said. "One more." "Tay, abort," Dae-hyun ordered. "That is an order. Get back to the airlock." "Almost done." The third charge was the deepest, requiring Tay to descend along the hive structure itself. He climbed down into the mass of hostile biomass, his armor failing piece by piece. When a tendril punched through his chest plate, Lysara heard him gasp in pain. "Tay!" Hana shouted. "Still! Breathing!" he said. "Charge! Placed! Timer! Active!" He started climbing back, but his movements were slow, labored. The armor was holding together through determination, more than structural integrity. 30 seconds to detonation, Wu said. "Tay, move!" 20 seconds. Tay was still 10 meters from the airlock. 10 seconds. He was 5 meters away. 5 seconds. He reached the airlock and fell inside. The fusion charges detonated. The hive exploded in a cascade of energy that lit up the gas giant's interior like a small sun. The submersible was thrown upward by the shock wave, riding the explosion toward the surface. Inside, the crew fought to maintain control. Dae-hyun piloted through the turbulence with skill born of desperation. Hana called out course corrections. Wu rerouted power to keep critical systems online. In the back, Nari worked on Tai over the comm link, talking the team through emergency medical procedures. "Stop the bleeding. Use the sealant foam. Keep pressure on the wound. Tay, stay with me. You are not dying in a gas giant. I forbid it." "Yes, ma'am," Tay whispered. They broke through the atmosphere 3 hours later, the submersible barely holding together. The moment they docked with the main ship, Nari was there with her medical team. Lysara watched as they carried Tay to surgery. His armor was destroyed, his body broken, but he was smiling. "Did we get it?" he asked. "We got it," Dae-hyun said. The hive's destruction had immediate effects. Across 14 star systems, swarm clusters lost coordination. They became erratic, predictable, vulnerable. The concordance forces, emboldened by the human example, began pushing back. But the victory came with a cost. 3 human soldiers died in the fighting that followed. Tay survived surgery but would need months of recovery. The submersible crew all suffered injuries that would leave permanent scars. Lysara attended the memorial service for the fallen humans. She watched Dae-hyun speak about each soldier, sharing their stories, their dreams, their sacrifices. She saw the tears on human faces and understood something important. They were not warriors because they did not feel. They were warriors because they felt everything and fought anyway. "Thank you," Lysara said to Dae-hyun afterward. "Your people saved us, but the price is always too high," Dae-hyun finished. "But the alternative was extinction. We paid the price so you would not have to." "Why?" Lysara asked. "Why would you sacrifice so much for beings you barely know?" Dae-hyun looked at the stars through the viewport. Because someone has to, he said simply. Because we can. Because it is right. Those are the only reasons that matter. 3 months after the hive's destruction, the last swarm cluster was eliminated. The threat was over. 14 star systems began the slow process of rebuilding. The dead were mourned, the survivors celebrated, and the galaxy tried to understand what had happened. The Galactic Concordance Council convened in emergency session. Representatives from 200 species gathered to discuss the human intervention and what it meant for the future. Lysara stood before them, no longer just an ambassador, but a witness to something that challenged every concordance principle. The humans violated 73 protocols, one representative said, his voice sharp with disapproval. They deployed weapons banned by concordance law. They engaged in systematic extermination. They celebrated violence. They saved 14 star systems, Lysara replied calmly. Billions of lives exist because of their actions. Lives that would have been consumed by the swarm. At what cost to our values? Another representative asked. We built the concordance on principles of peace, of harmony. What the humans did was necessary, Lysara interrupted. And that is what we must face. Our values, our peaceful nature, made us vulnerable to a threat we could not comprehend. The swarm did not care about our harmony. It only understood consumption and growth. The council chamber filled with uncomfortable harmonics. No one wanted to admit it, but they all knew the truth. Their peaceful nature had nearly led to extinction. So you propose we become like them, a representative said. That we abandon our values and embrace violence? No, Lysara said firmly. I propose we understand that the universe contains threats our values cannot address. And when those threats emerge, we need allies who can face them. She activated a holographic display showing the human forces in action. The images were brutal, violent, everything the concordance had tried to evolve beyond. But they were also effective. Look at them, Lysara said. Really look. Yes, they are violent. Yes, they are comfortable with destruction. But they are also loyal, compassionate, and willing to die for beings they barely know. They cry for their fallen. They mourn their enemies. They carry the weight of their violence like a burden, not a joy. She showed footage of Nari working in the medical bay, saving Velen and human lives with equal dedication. Of Wu sharing his engineering knowledge with concordance technicians, of Tae teaching Velen security forces basic combat principles, his patience infinite despite his injuries. They are not monsters, Lysara said. They are survivors from a world that demanded they be strong, and they use that strength to save us. The debate lasted for days. Some species wanted the humans punished for their violations. Others wanted them honored. A few wanted them quarantined again, their violence contained. Finally, Dae-hyun was invited to address the council personally. He stood before the 200 species, wearing his dress uniform, his posture straight, despite the healing wounds he carried. Hana, Wu, Tae in his wheelchair, and Nari stood beside him. Members of the Concordance, Dae-hyun began. I understand your fear. Our species is violent. We evolved in conflict, and we carry that legacy in our culture, our history, our very nature. You are right to be cautious. The council members stirred, surprised by his honesty. But I want you to understand something, he continued. We do not celebrate violence. We endure it. Every human who fought in this war will carry scars, physical and mental, for the rest of their lives. We will remember the faces of those we killed. We will mourn our losses. We will question our choices. He gestured to his team. Hana will have nightmares about the soldiers she could not save. Wu will wake up thinking about the weapons he created. Tae will live with pain from his injuries every day. Nari will remember every patient she lost. And I will carry the weight of every decision that led to death. His voice grew stronger. We do not fight because we love it. We fight because we love life. Because we love our families, our friends, our worlds. Because when we see innocent beings threatened, we cannot stand by and do nothing. That is what Earth taught us. That is what it means to be human. He paused, looking around the chamber. You ask what we want. We do not want membership in the Concordance. We do not want territory or resources or power. We want partnership. When the next threat emerges, and it will, we want to be there to help. We will maintain our quarantine, live in our own space, follow our own path. But when you call for help, we will answer. And what do you want in return? A council member asked. Knowledge, Dae-Hyun said simply. Your science, your culture, your perspectives. We want to learn from you as much as you can learn from us. We want to be better than what our violent history made us. And maybe together, we can create something stronger than either of us alone. The vote took 3 days. In the end, the Concordance agreed to the partnership. The humans would remain in quarantine, but they would also form a rapid response force for existential threats. They would share their combat knowledge in exchange for concordant science and culture. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a start. On the day the humans departed, Lysara came to see them off. She found Dae-Hyun on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching Harmonia 7 recede in the distance. Your people will remember us, Lysara said. We are already writing songs about the Deathworlders who answered our call. What will you tell your children? Dae-Hyun asked. About us? About what we did? Lysara considered the question carefully. We will tell them the truth, she said. That you are violent, dangerous, and terrifying. That you come from a world that tried to kill you, and you survived by being stronger than everything that hunted you. That you carry weapons and know 1,000 ways to kill. She moved closer to the viewport. But we will also tell them that you are kind. That you saved us when no one else would. That you cried for your fallen and mourned your enemies. That you taught us that strength and compassion are not opposites. That the same hands that build weapons can also heal wounds. That is a lot to carry, Dae-Hyun said. It is who you are, Lysara replied. You are contradictions made flesh. You are the species that will die to protect strangers, that will charge into hell for people you just met, that will sacrifice everything for a cause you believe in. You are terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Dae-Hyun smiled. I will take that as a compliment. It is, Lysara said, the highest compliment my people can give. You are survivors, and you taught us to survive. The human fleet departed that evening, jumping to FTL and vanishing into the stars. But they left behind something more valuable than technology or tactics. They left behind hope. The Concordance began to change, not abandoning their peaceful nature, but augmenting it with the understanding that peace must sometimes be defended. Velen security forces trained in basic combat. Concordance ships installed defensive weapons. The peaceful species of the galaxy learned that survival required more than good intentions, but they also learned from human compassion. Concordance medical teams adopted Nari's aggressive treatment protocols, saving lives that would have been lost. Engineers studied Wu's creative problem-solving, finding new solutions to old problems. Diplomats learned from Dae-Hyun's honest communication style. The galaxy became stronger for the partnership. Years passed. Other threats emerged. Pirates, rogue AI, spatial anomalies, hostile species from beyond known space. And each time, when the Concordance sent out a distress call, the humans answered. Sometimes they arrived with weapons and armor ready for war. Sometimes they arrived with medicine and tools, ready to help rebuild. But they always arrived, always answered, always kept their promise. Lysara, now head of the Concordance Council, kept a holographic image in her office. It showed Dae-Hyun and his team standing before the ruins of a swarm cluster, battered and exhausted, but alive. Below the image was a quote from the human captain. "We answer because someone has to. We fight because we love life. We survive because we refuse to give up. That is what it means to be human." And below that, in vellum script, Lysara had added her own words. "They are Deathworlders. They are survivors. They are heroes. And when darkness comes, they answer." On the Indomitable, now stationed at the edge of concordant space, Dae-hyun received regular updates from across the galaxy. The swarm was gone, its clusters destroyed, its threat eliminated. New species were joining the concordance, drawn by the promise of protection and partnership. Hana had returned to her homeworld to train the next generation of tactical officers. Wu was consulting with concordance engineers on defensive technologies. Tae, recovered from his injuries, commanded a joint human concordance security force. Nari ran a medical exchange program, teaching concordance doctors human resilience techniques. The crew of the Indomitable had changed too. They still carried weapons and trained for war, but they also carried concordance art, studied alien cultures, and made friends across the stars. They were still warriors, but they were also ambassadors, teachers, and partners. One day, a new distress signal arrived. A species at the far edge of concordant space, facing an unknown threat, desperately calling for help. Dae-hyun read the message and smiled. "All hands," he announced over the ship's comm. "We have a distress call. Plot a course and prepare for FTL. Someone needs help." "And we answer," the crew responded as one. The Indomitable jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying its crew toward another battle, another rescue, another chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength was not their capacity for violence, but their refusal to let others face darkness alone. In the depths of space, the galaxy watched and learned. The Deathworlders had answered, and they would keep answering for as long as someone needed help, because that was what it meant to be human.